Good morning, everybody. It's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. It's like a throwback edition. We welcome our longtime friend, Scott Raab. How's it going, Scott?
You know, it's going all right. I'm happy to be that we're talking again. I only come out of retirement for good reasons, and one of them is being able to discuss push the potatoes around the plate with you, Craig Wendell.
Well, and I always appreciate when you reach out to us. It's an honor. I know you kind of scoff at compliments like that, but it's an honor when you reach out to us and come on this podcast.
Yeah, I think we should focus for at least 20 minutes on the honor part of that statement. But I'll be gracious. I think what happens on my end, and I don't think it's any ethical lapse to suggest that the reason I reached out is because I'm still anticipating a Francisco Lindor trade before the winter meetings finish rippling. But I didn't want to wait either. So whether or not Lindor gets traded this off season, I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of a billionaire.
Well, and I think it's important. It's something that I touched on in my last podcast, because over the last, it's been since 2000, since the Dolans have owned this team, they've set the message, and they've trained a lot of the Cleveland Indians fan base to really care about their bank account.
I want to get to just, ownership in Cleveland in general, because we're talking about three billionaires, two of them out of state, literally. We're not talking about homegrown billionaires. We're talking about the Haslams and about Dan Gilbert. But I'm happy to start with the Dolans, because I think it's important for people to understand that, we can start anywhere, but I think I want to take a step back and also say that we're talking now in the end of 2019, and as rabid and angry as any fan base can get, I mean, it's a real tough time right now, I think, for Cleveland fans. And it's a real tough time for the culture in general. Sports always is a mirror. And so I'm going to try and stay calm today and not get too worked up, especially because I think there's fundamental disconnects, misunderstandings about the unique nature of the business model, professional sports. We spend a lot of time, and you're talking about fans' expectations being managed. And that's because, one of the things you have to look at in terms of the business structure is that the media really are partners. Now, we're living in a time where anyone who chooses to believe that the media collectively, national, local, whatever, are enemies of the teams. We're living in a time where whatever your politics are, the idea of fake news and media as enemy of the whatever is more ascendant than it's ever been as far as I can remember. And it's kind of important to remember that these are businesses that depend on, reader engagement, on fan engagement. That I believe the Browns, for example, are business partners with both radio stations in town that cover sports exclusively. It's not a good and evil thing. That's just a reality check. The Dolan family trust, which is shared among the same Dolans that own the New York Knicks, which is instructive, by the way. They share in a $4 or $5 billion family trust. We'll never know, what the books look like when Paul Dolan talks to whomever he wants to talk to in the media, kind of unfiltered. I don't want to trash people. I've been part of the media myself for 30 years and have become friends with and kind of the guys I was fans of, like Tony Grossi, who started in 1984, when I was in my early 30s. So I want to get lost in just disrespecting individuals, I just want to say that, yeah, we've got a baseball fan base, for example, that has been conditioned for years, especially the last couple of years. So look at the age 25, age 26, switch hitting, silver slugger, gold glove, not just going from prospect to the face of the franchise, but from prospect to the face of Major League Baseball, the guy who gets mic'd up at the All-Star game. The guy, whether you call him Frankie or Francisco or Mr. Smile, he's not just the face of the tribe. He's one of the faces of Major League Baseball in 2019. And for years, and especially with the hashtag now, enjoy them while you can. It's amazing. Yes, you can understand Major League Baseball economics. And I think I do, as well as a layman can. But I don't expect people to go out and read Zimbalist's work on the true economic impact. There's plenty of disagreement about these franchises, but there's absolutely no way that someone can adopt a position and say that the Dolan families or Paul Dolan's choice not to nail down a 5 or 6 year deal based on what you think the percentage of payroll can be spent by a smaller mid-market team on any one player. No. I'm sorry. You don't understand what $1 billion is. You really don't. And even talking about the capital appreciation, the asset appreciation between paying 300 or 350 million and knowing that the team is valued abstractly, at 1 billion or, it's worth whatever someone's willing to pay. But the fact that they're losing money is not a fact at all. And the fact that Paul Dolan can't risk, 250 or 300 or 400 million dollars to retain a player that can be used and they are assets the same way when I was a independent contractor. I could amortize my computer. I could amortize the people don't want to think about what being a billionaire is, what having a family trust is. They would rather talk about it like, well, you can't expect a guy to lose money. Well, he ain't losing money. Jimmy Haslam, the value of the Browns goes up when the incentive to win simply isn't there. And I think it's really important for fans to understand that. It doesn't mean that prospect analysis or getting a great haul for any individual, or talking about the Indians front office winning trades or doing the draft, the mock draft stuff. It doesn't mean it's not like legitimate, but at a time like this, when I really am convinced that Lindor is not going to be the face of the tribe for much longer, where almost all the media on air, whatever's left of print, online, that there's no one really taking a position. Like the Browns culture, let's assume Jimmy Haslam knew nothing about what was going on at Pilot Flying J. The feds, but let's assume that, let's take him at his word. He was totally walled off by that. He's a billionaire. He lawyered up real good. The truth of the matter is he took a company from being relatively small to a multi-billion dollar industry based on a culture of overt fraud, depraved racism. So let's assume that the CEO, Jimmy Haslam, knew nothing about that. So that was a culture of dishonesty, chaos, greed, and racketeering. That's the company that Jimmy Haslam's billions and billions of dollars are based on. I don't understand how you can't look at the culture he presided over, at least in name, at Pilot Flying J, and see some of it translated into what's going on in front of us, separate from anything that Tony Grossi ever writes, and from however many carries Nick Chubb gets.
Well,
the decision making in the culture don't seem to have changed that much from what brought down his other business.
No, and before we get to the Browns, let's go back to the Indians for a second, because the thing that really kicked me off, and it's an odd thing because in a vacuum, trading Corey Kluber for a prospect and a 4A outfielder, it's not that big of a deal in a vacuum. But it's part of the overall storyline that we've seen since the Dolans owned the team. They inherited a team with payrolls in the top 10 and quickly drove the payroll all the way down into the $40 million range for 3 or 4 years, decimated their season ticket base, and have been crying poor basically ever since. And this idea that they can't afford to sign, I get that they can't sign every free agent. They can't be the leader of the hot stove season, as it were. But the idea that they couldn't carve off $40 million a year, even something gaudy like that, for a transcendent player like Francisco Lindor, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And any financial information that the media is going off of is information that has been handed to them basically by the Dolan family, or kind of extrapolated poorly by Forbes.
And that's there's no mystery to it. There's no lack of transparency to the lack of transparency. This is how business is done in every sport. They are cartels. They are not publicly held companies, I guess, with some odd exception of the Green Bay Packers. But just in terms of baseball, it's not hard to see the obvious flaws in the economic model, and it's not hard to see how easy it is to hide behind those facts. Those are facts. All we're trying to do, all I want to focus on, because it is a business. The media is a business. The pro sports franchise is a business. Is we know that the Dolans are perfectly content to see the value of the franchise grow, to be, and they still are, to be perceived as the best owners in Cleveland. Again, this is one of the things about wanting to talk to you is, yeah, I grew up there. I lived there into my 30s. I'm closely attached to the city and a frequent whatever, my entire life. I'm 67. I've lived in Iowa City for 7, Texas for a couple of years, Los Angeles, Philly for years. I paid attention to media and sports franchises my whole life. And we ignore some glaring truths, which is that the Dolan family, the Knicks included, can do whatever they want. They do not have the same incentive to lose a dime. These franchises can only be owned by billionaires. They suck tax subsidies. I mean, literally the Gateway complex. I mean, these aren't like, enemy of the people, fake news constructs. The voters in Cuyahoga County are paying to help billionaires who are already subsidized in almost every case in terms of property taxes, sharing naming rights. And, it's unbelievable in a city where child poverty rate is 40%, and the schools really aren't ever going to attract some critical mass of young families who want to, and meanwhile, we're having fierce debates about whether they're going to spend the $17 million they save on Corey Kluber on finding talent to go along with Mr. Enjoy Him While You Can. It's insane not to step back and look at the big picture and not consider the media the enemy. The media is the local sports media in Cleveland is only the enemy to the extent, and these aren't bad people and they're great professionals. It's hard to ask the tough questions. It's hard to confront ownership. It's hard not to simply serve as a mouthpiece. There's a lot of pressure there. We've seen what happened when a longtime beat reporter for a major metropolitan newspaper, makes a mistake in a DM and disrespects, doesn't demonize, but kind of dismisses an owner and loses his beat despite being a member of the guild. There is no difference between the Cleveland Indians or the Cleveland Browns or the Cleveland Cavaliers and any other kind of thing. It's not a pizza joint. It's not a restaurant chain. It's not a dry cleaner. These are institutions that again, taxpayer subsidized and wind up kind of owning the media. And we wind up, talking, and I'm happy to, on the podcast. But it's hard not to get lost on message boards, and especially people are angry and upset about almost every fucking thing now. And, there's no room for dialogue or disagreement. To remember, these are billionaires, and being a billionaire is a superpower. If Jimmy Haslam doesn't know anything or knows everything about what's going on at Flying J, once the feds step in, Jimmy Haslam lawyers up. It doesn't matter. Politics doesn't matter. Only money matters. I know I sound like, Ned Beatty at the end of Network, which, by the way, you should be studying that movie, all y'all. But, it's only money. And the idea that our teams, the teams that we kind of, how they do really does affect our emotional well-being because we're fucking crazy, doesn't work that way for the Haslam family. It really doesn't work that way for the Dolans. It certainly doesn't work that way. I mean, at least Dan Gilbert, you can argue, despite the erratic nature of his ownership, was the one owner in town who was willing to, fuck the fucking luxury tax. I want to win. There is no incentive that I can see or evidence of reaction to an incentive on the part of the Dolans or the Haslams to say winning comes first. And if that means going the Holmgren route again and luring Bill Parcells or somebody out of retirement, the way the Browns are being run now by a scout in a sweatshirt, John Dorsey, and a drunken pitmaster, Freddie Kitchens, and D and Jimmy Haslam, who just stagger. They just stagger, basically. I mean, I don't want to argue anymore about Odell Beckham Jr. reporting to, OTAs. I would rather take a step back at this point and say, well, I care a whole lot more about winning than Paul Dolan or Jimmy Haslam do, and so do you, and so does anyone listening.
So when do you think the contentious relationship began between specifically Cleveland Browns fans and Cleveland Browns media? Because I don't actually remember when it started. I don't remember reading about the Browns in the 80s. I certainly started watching them in the 1980s, but I didn't read the paper back in those days.
It's such a naive question, and I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean as take a step back and think about when that started, and think about just the one-loss record. Let's just keep it real simple. Let's say that you're a guy who literally, like Mary Kay, like Ridenauer, like Nate, like Ulrich, like Tony Grossi, like Tom Reed, like you name the guy, you name the radio host, Ken Carman, Rizzo, Hammer, name any of those guys, and think about just the one-loss record. Let's keep it real simple. When did it start? Take a look at the one-loss record. Take a look at the hirings and the firings. Take a look. I mean, what else is there to cover? It starts because you have a team that is now so deeply entrenched in failure that how is it not going to be contentious unless you're literally a public relations, a media relations employee, which no one that regardless of how you feel about any of these people, and this one's a shill and that one's a moron, and etc. Why is it contentious? Because the culture is toxic and they can't win in a league designed to produce parity, where the turnarounds are really not. Kansas City Chiefs were 2-14 when Andy Reid stepped into the job. That doesn't mean Bruce Arians would be 11-5 this season. But it does mean that the contentiousness and the one-loss record are inseparable. You got to cover this franchise. If you're doing it with any degree of honesty, if you're serving the reader, the fan at all, you better hold them accountable. It's just like covering any other institution. You and I talked yesterday about the sex scandal at Ohio State that's unfolding now. Entirely hushed up. It's as big as Michigan State's. It's as big as Penn State. It's growing. It's real. At OSU. Yeah. I wonder why we're not hearing more about this. I wonder why when you and I were talking yesterday, you literally had no idea what I was talking about. We're talking about 20 years of abuse, sexual abuse perpetrated by a university physician, and the university knew about it. Exactly the same.
So
anyway, I'm sorry to be...
No, it's okay. Because I was so taken aback by the fact that I somehow that was off my radar. I brought it to some of the guys at Waiting for Next Year yesterday, especially some of those guys live in Columbus, and I'm trying to I was trying to figure it out. And first of all, nobody knows exactly why it didn't take hold nationally. It hit in August. It has been reported on in Columbus, but for whatever reason, I'm not sure what part of the story hasn't allowed
I can tell
it.
you.
Go ahead.
I can tell you what. I can tell you why, because you tell me who's covering it in Columbus or anywhere. USA Today has covered it at different points, but the truth of the matter is that it's not being covered in the sports section at all. Okay, I'm not suggesting some conspiracy of silence. I'm just saying Ohio State University, like the Cleveland Browns, like the government, like any Ohio State University is an 800-pound gorilla in that state and pays legions, layers of lawyers, of media relations people, of lobbyists, on and on and on and on. So the fact that it's not being covered, at least as far as I can tell, by the same outlets who devote enormous focus to Ohio State University sports, is the answer to the question.
Well, and not to mention the fact that nobody ever graduated from the University of Cleveland Browns. So, but people who did, they've got some level of graduate pride, and the graduates are all over the place. And maybe that, that definitely has to impact the way that whole situation is covered as well.
Who's the biggest employer in the state of Ohio? Who has billionaire donors in the state? I'm just saying. This isn't me going, oh, look at the contrails in the sky. There must be chemicals in there, and Hillary Clinton eats children. I've got a dark web video I need to.
Can I tell you about a pizza place?
That's what I'm just saying. What I'm talking about it's not fake news. It's the way things actually work. And there is not a more powerful you tell me, maybe the clinic, if you're a Clevelander, feels like a more powerful institution with more reach and leverage than the Ohio State University. I don't think there's a more powerful entity in the state of Ohio, except maybe state government. And it's not like Ohio State University and state government don't have a close relationship. I'm not suggesting a conspiracy of silence. I'm saying the natural outcome, when all the leverage and all the money and all the power and all the influence is on the side of an institution like OSU, versus at this point, there are class action lawsuits and hundreds, if not thousands, of plaintiffs. And it's serious stuff. If you thought the gymnasts at Michigan State University were victims, or Jerry Sandusky's behavior was criminal, you got to take a look at what's going on, right in front of our eyes at the Ohio State University. But all I'm saying, I'm not saying, the Haslams or whomever are some perpetrators of that kind of. I'm saying the ability to control the media, to manage fans' expectations, that's part of the job. That who calls in to talk radio? I'm done writing columns or anything like that about Cleveland sports, but I really do, and you really do, and anyone listening really does care enormously about the one-loss record. And, with semi-competent coaching this year, or with the addition of Michael Brantley you know what I mean? Outcomes are different in terms of wins and losses. The incentives are not the same for ownership. They are not the same.
No.
And comparing it to, well, you can't expect a businessman to lose money. You know what? You find the other businesses in town that receive tax subsidies from county-wide sales of cigarettes and liquor. There ain't any. It's not a business in that sense. And it's stupid to keep talking about economic models, whether it's baseballs or a normal business. Talking about unique businesses protected by federal antitrust laws. It's like apples and oranges. Let's at least stay sane in the conversation and look at who's really in control of winning and losing games. It's ownership.
And we know this stuff. We've watched Amazon. Amazon is a business that, quote unquote, lost money and maybe lost money last year for God's sake.
Exactly. And has lobbyists and lawyers, and it's no different. It's no different than the Dolans, than Dan Gilbert. Dan Gilbert, I think, gave close to $1 million to the president's inaugural committee and benefited enormously, from subsequent legislation, tax break type stuff.
He was there
Fine,
when the Cubs visited the White House, was he not?
Which I'm not saying that we're talking about politics and whether he gave it to this or that inaugural committee. What he did was act like a savvy businessman. And when you're a billionaire, and again, I can't stress this enough. If you get through, any kind of career and you've amassed, a 401k or something, you know what I mean? I'm 67 now. And so you get into, a lot of the actuarial stuff of trying to figure out, when do I draw Social Security? How do I project for? And if you've assembled some combination of assets that approach or exceed $1 million, even today, at least you got something to work with. At least if you're a reasonable, sane human being, barring catastrophe, you're not going to be eating cat food. Okay, so let's just say that person's a millionaire, for the sake of argument. A billionaire, okay, $1 billion is $1,000 million. 1,000, not 100 million, not 500 million.
Most of this audience would retire if somebody handed them $1 million right now.
Well,
and we're talking about somebody with 1,000 of them.
Well, I've known some entrepreneurs in my life, intersecting with them both in terms of my job. I was at Esquire and GQ for 25 years and wrote about rebuilding the World Trade Center. And there are billionaires involved in that, one of whom in particular was a source. And it's not like I've done some study of billionaires, but
and I'm sorry, Scott, I want to interrupt you because you talked to one of the ones that I loved talking to you about was when you interviewed Taylor Swift, and she's maybe the most successful musician of the last 20 years. She ain't a billionaire. Not yet anyway.
LeBron's not a billionaire, and he's got literally $1 billion, I believe. His Nike deal, his last Nike deal was some lifetime Nike deal. I'm just saying that the every tax law, again, you can afford your own legion if you need one of accountants and lawyers, and the money that you have safely invested makes money, that huge amounts of money, even at 5 or 7%. If taxed at all, the capital gains are taxed, I believe, at 15%. If you're paying tax, and that's literally what we're talking about. Family trusts in one case, the Dolans, Dan Gilbert, I think, is $4, $5, $6 billion on the last Forbes list. These are just guesses, even the Forbes list. But we are talking about a critical mass of wealth that is equivalent to a literal superpower. Literal superpower. You don't have to worry about flying first class. You either have a corporate jet or you're a net jet. You're a charter jet user, and that's how these people live. The decisions that they make about whether or not to re-sign Francisco Lindor are money driven only. They are not driven by any kind of urgency to win, in the sense that those of us who are literally screaming at each other about, Freddie Kitchens or those of us who love Tito and Nick, I just don't know what to say to Corey Kluber. The quote I'm talking about. Terry Francona. And we have our narratives. We've never been in the clubhouse. We don't. But it's a little bit heartbreaking. But the truth of the matter is, it's business, and that's all it is. And all these, you think LeBron had a $90 million shoe contract entering the NBA, has changed the face of the entire league forever. That's no one. Whether we're talking about Lindor, whether we're talking about LeBron, whether we're talking about OBJ, no one ever paid a penny to see Paul Dolan sign a check. Or, you know what I'm saying. We could talk about the Indians front office winning trades all day long. We could talk about, Ray Farmer's drafting acumen versus John Dorsey. But, for these guys, they're the talent. And nobody sits around bitching about how Tom Cruise is a diva. No one begrudges Tom Cruise $30, $40 million plus plus a piece of the gross, not the net. Nobody cares about his loyalty to anything. Nobody roots for the shirt he's wearing because it has Glenridge, New Jersey on it. But Tom Cruise, by the way, was a high school wrestler in the town where I live. I'm just saying, these are our guys. I learned over the years they're not just two-dimensional. LeBron taught me a lot. In our lifelong love affair, I learned a lot from LeBron James. There are actual human beings out there who are risking, unlike Tom Cruise, who are literally risking a career-ending injury every time there's a snap. I love getting lost in the weeds with all these guys. I feel almost like, I know what Jose Ramirez and Francisco do. You know what I'm saying. You really have relationships with the teams and the fans that are a wonderful part of for me, of my daily existence as a boy and now as a man. But good Lord, this is really hard right now. The idea of Kluber gone. Forget what the return was. There is an emotional investment we have that I'm sorry the Dolan simply never will, and that's okay. But it's not okay to act as if we're each other's enemies, and somehow the real point of it is OPS plus, fan graphs or Pro Football Focus. I love that stuff. I've been reading Bill James since the 80s. I don't pretend to anything but a layman's knowledge, but I've been reading Baseball Perspective. I follow Pro Football Focus. The NBA sabermetrically has become, a fool's paradise. But the truth of the matter is we're on the outside of all that, including the beat reporters in the NBA, NFL, and MLB. It's very difficult and very tough time right now, whether you're WFNY or whether you're I don't even want to say like a guy like Mike Silver, Ian Rappaport. You only get the access that you're allowed. You're treated with contempt, not just by a lot of players, but by the so-called professionals. And it's very, very hard if you stake out a position on your site or anywhere else that's the least bit angry or negative, right? You hear about it from the teams.
Oh yeah. There are rabbit ears all over Cleveland. And we will occasionally get emails from PR folks, or we have over the years. But the thing that is so strange to me is that as fans, we make buying decisions. We make our buying decisions based on emotional connection to guys like Corey Kluber and Lindor. And that's really what the Dolan family is selling, more than anything else.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they want us to co-sign with Antonetti and Chernoff and guys like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to have an emotional connection with Antonetti and Chernoff.
It's impossible. I mean, that only happens in places, where, people are associated with ultimate success. I mean, we wind up, with the media too, just blaming the fans for not showing up. We had a GM for many years who was beloved of writers because Mark Shapiro was always a great quote. And he's the guy, hashtag enjoy him while you can is not far removed at all from Mark Shapiro saying, hey, if all you're coming out to see is a win, don't come. That's hard to imagine a general manager of a professional sports franchise anywhere in America feeling comfy saying that to a fan base. And we've seen the magic that he's worked in Toronto with the Blue Jays, the same thing. It's about money and his ability to maintain good relationships with the media and to some extent with the fans while he manages expectations and payroll and wins lower. And that's fine. That's what we're used to. But
and fans think it's an accident that owners love guys like that.
Yeah, no, it's not. And doing more with less happens everywhere. Everywhere in our culture, in our business culture. You talk to your doctor about it. You talk to anyone, and you know what I mean. You have breakfast with Bob Evans and ask your waitress, how many jobs she had. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And guys like Shapiro went to Princeton. Dad Ron was a sports agent. I love Mark Shapiro. I've sat with him at least one memorable time when I was hoping to do a book about, that young, hungry front office that is spread out. Anyway, I'm saying these are brilliant guys. I'm not saying anything bad about Antonetti. He's ever, no, we don't have relationships with them. That's like saying, man, I like the Beatles, but Brian Epstein was really where it's at. I know I'm dating myself. The point being,
no, but it's an important point, Scott, because I always say that about the Dolans too. They're wonderful people. I wish they owned a grocery store chain or an auto dealership or some other successful business that I didn't have to root for. Because they do give back. They are active in the community. They're wonderful people. But as far as owning sports franchise, they just don't fit the profile of what I want. And their goals aren't aligned with mine. They've proven it over the course of the better part of 20 years. And I just don't know. I don't know why fans just can't admit that to be a fact.
It's painful, and it's more fun to pretend, that if we platoon David DeLucci and Jason Michaels, we'll have a better than a replacement level right or left field.
Did you forget about Trot Nixon?
Listen, I like all that stuff. I like to understand what's going on. What's the vision here? And seriously, it's discernible. Even if we're talking about the Tribe, the vision's clear. They're wonderful people. Fine, I'll take your word for it. I don't see everything that's done in the community because I don't literally live there. I know when the Haslams refurbish practice fields.
Yep.
I do. I stay connected as I can, and it's real easy, having friends and digital media. But for the Tribe, it really is about competing in the AL Central, not being a doormat, hoping that the next wave of young, I get all that, but really the bottom line for the Tribe really is the bottom line. You got Paul Dolan literally telling Terry Pluto, whoever he talks to, that, we actually lost a little money last year, and it kind of gets dutifully reported and contextualized by, we understand MLB's, economic system. We understand the size of the market. We all know the size of the Dolan's TV deal. It all gets, but we understand that's the bottom line. And the Cavs, they're led by a crazy guy. God bless Dan Gilbert. Seriously, I got to know him a little bit. He's a brilliant. To say he's a brilliant guy, he's a pure American entrepreneur. I've known maybe two or three. I don't know Dan Gilbert well, but the truth of the matter really is, he ended the 52-year championship drought. Whatever, and I give all credit, not just LeBron and Kyrie, but they actually won the motherfucker. But, Dan Gilbert was willing to do whatever it took, whatever version of an apology combined with whatever amount of money. And the fact that it seems like it was 20 years ago that David Griffin, that they couldn't keep it together remotely, tells you all you need to know. The Cavs are crazy. Yes, money's important, and obviously they took all they could in order to renovate, the Q or whatever they're calling it now. The idea that any taxpayer money, any future money was bonded by it's insane when you think about what Dan Gilbert is actually worth. But it's a fait accompli, and despite the fact that I find them unwatchable, and I have no idea what Kobe Altman said, I have no idea what the vision is there, literally no idea. I find no hope whatsoever in the way that the roster is being put together, and I find the results too hard to watch. They're not even competitive. And yet, at least I understand they're crazy. And we'll see what happens.
You stick around long enough, you see these patterns over and over again. They're collecting assets that don't match up. Very similarly to when
Chris Grant.
Yeah, Chris Grant, Kyrie Irving, Dion Waiters. Yeah. Those two didn't fit either.
It's funny because I'm honestly, I think one of the things, getting older, certainly you hope you mellow a little, but the fact that I went to a parade in Cleveland. We saw that. I feel okay. That doesn't mean I'm going to pretend that I think Sexton and Garland are going to be part of the next Cavs team that wins a bunch of games. I look at the team and I have no idea where the next iteration of the Cavs that actually wins 50 or more games is going to come from. I don't see any players out. You could look at Kyrie, and I'll always love Kyrie, but if Kyrie is the best player on your roster, if Kevin Love is the best player on your roster, you're not really competing for a championship. As great as Kyrie is, or has been, or as great as Kevin Love is, in today's NBA, that ain't going to get you out of the second round. Yeah.
No, which again speaks to the early part of LeBron's career and what he did with the Cavs. The more time passes, the more I'm impressed with LeBron's first stint in Cleveland.
And it's true that even at my worst or angriest or most insane.
Hey, me too. I didn't write a book, but I was right there with you.
No, but I mean, even in that first book, I mean, by 2007, it was clear to me that in terms of all-round skill and that the coming into the league when he did and the way that he was already the best basketball player. I mean, it's a separate conversation talking about Michael and six. Michael will always be Michael. But in terms of LeBron is now in his 17th season, and seriously, I don't watch every Lakers game at all. But when I tune in, I see him playing with Anthony Davis. I see their record. I see what he looks like on the court. There has never, in any sport, been the like of LeBron James. Period.
Nope. And Michael Jordan is the Beatles. He'll always be the first and the biggest. And
he's in a category of his own. He really is the 6 for 6 alone in terms of rings. No Cleveland fan is going to scoff at the rings. I can get lost in arguments about Scottie Pippen and strength of opponents. Forget about it. It's Michael Jordan. No amount of LeBron glory throws any shade whatsoever on the GOAT.
No.
I can choose to do it. It's kind of like, I love Cleveland. I know what Cleveland is. I owe Cleveland more than I could ever repay. I'm not ever going to be the guy who starts listing, the art museum is admission free in the Cleveland Orchestra. And you know what I mean? I don't have to list LeBron's attributes anymore. I don't have to defend Cleveland or New Jersey for that matter to anyone. It speaks for itself. Either you see it or you don't. If you don't, you're a fucking moron, and we can't have a dialogue. You know what I'm saying? That's just it. Anyone who it doesn't mean I'm going, face to face. I'm long past the point of even debating much on Twitter. I'm just saying.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite part of when Kyrie said all the things he said about Boston after leaving Cleveland, and I don't care. I don't expect a 20-something to love Cleveland more than the nightlife in Boston. Yeah. Whatever, it's fine.
Dude. All I'm ever going to care about is the shuffle step, and the shot.
Yes.
That's all I'm ever going to care about. What else? If I spent my whole life, if I framed the whole book and hung all my sports outrage and personal misery on a young black kid out of West Akron, the best athlete Ohio's. I'm going to hold a grudge now against Kyrie, LeBron, or anyone else. No way. That happens. It's not like, it's more special for me. No, if it's not special for you and everyone else, if you can't drop some of the insanity and bitterness and take a step back and count yourself lucky because you saw a parade, please. What was the point of being a fan at all if that doesn't take some of the whatever the hate is and replace it with genuine love? Especially Kyrie made that fucking shot
over one of the most hated players since John Elway.
Dude, they came back from being down 3-1 against an NBA team that set an all-time record for season victories. No, we can go through the litany forever. We don't even have to, but we should bring some of that feeling to bear when we're going crazy at each other about this stuff.
Right.
Yes, I'd much rather, that it would have been the Browns. I'd much rather it would have been the Tribe. People honestly feel that way, and I totally respect it and get it. But I thought the possibility certainly existed in my head as I moved through my 60s that I might never see.
Well, and it also makes me feel like a little bit of a hypocrite too, because what would I be saying if Michael Martinez is not the final batter of the World Series and the Indians somehow win a World Series?
Man,
It changes the entire
man,
conversation.
I told you my personal story. I mean, I signed a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't go into specifics. But literally, the tribe and the Cubs, if there are companies that do ads, two ads, one for they're going to run whichever team wins. I had the voiceover if the tribe had won for one of those types of ads.
Right.
So for me personally, it was still on the heels of the Cavs win. It was still okay, but I always laugh to myself because I haven't seen. I was born in '52. None of us have seen the Indians win a World Series. None of us.
Right.
I don't know that we ever will or that we won't, and it's okay with me because I saw the parade, man. I went to the parade with my kids. What the fuck? It doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean I think the Dolans are doing right by Cleveland fans. It doesn't think I don't think the media is doing right by calling Cleveland a bad baseball town. It's fucking laughable. It's laughable to me. But you have fans doing it too. All over my kids. Fans are only show up for $1 hot dogs. You know what? All I can tell you is put the team on the field and establish something for the fans in terms of continuity. And make it to the play every time. And I go every time when the Tribe makes it to the postseason. There are no empty seats. You look at those TV ratings, and in terms of share, they're enormous. Calling it a bad baseball town while you dutifully record Paul Dolan whining about them losing money and telling you to enjoy this again 26-year-old switch hitting Silver Slugger, Gold Glove shortstop that the entire sport considers one of a more beautiful, a more compelling face than Mike Trout's, who's literally not just a generational hitter, but one of the greatest hitters who's ever lived. And that's not to diss Lindor. It's simply saying, what the fuck are we arguing about prospect calls for? When the truth of the matter is, they really don't care all that much about winning, and we really do.
No, in this self-flagellation of the fan base over attendance, the same people who look at the macroeconomic factors that keep the Indians down because they're a small market won't quote the macroeconomic thing about baseball. Baseball attendance is down across the entire league. People are watching more on TV, and the TV ratings are through the roof for the Indians. This team is supported. This team is loved. So stop with that. This team is loved and supported, period.
Everything is reverse engineered to support this, what I think is a false narrative about what Jacobs Field meant, what it meant for the Browns to be missing, and how that was just some accident. It wasn't an accident in 1948. It wasn't an accident, during the 90s. The truth is, it is not a zero sum. Fans only have X number of dollars, and they're making choices between Browns 8 games a year, season tickets plus preseason, and walk-up Indians tickets. The Tribe decimated its own corporate fan base, and blaming it on the Great Recession is fine if you can present data that support a relationship between those two things that I can understand. But what we're talking about this many years down the road is, again, a team where the fan expectations have been consistently lowered time after time after time. So we're grateful for everything we have, and minor, really trivial trades that we down to the benefit of the front office do count. But ultimately, we wind up trying to figure out how to say goodbye, or think about our beloved Tito saying goodbye to a guy who could very well, be a quality, if not ace level. So I understand they're dealing from a position of strength. I remember weeping a tear in a hotel room in Warsaw, Poland on August 1st, 20 whatever, when I was watching video of Victor Martinez crying in the locker room. These guys are real. Corey Kluber is real. These are real human beings, real families, real relationship between Francona and Kluber. I really like that. I really find it meaningful as a fan. I don't think that the Dolan family finds it all that meaningful.
Well,
and whatever they do with the $17 million, we're all literally going, gosh, I hope they plow it back into payroll because, baseball's economic structure and that TV deal, you know what I mean? It's like a hard place to be. Being a Cleveland fan is it's defined my fucking life and all for the good. No one has gotten more out of it than I have. And, the fact that I'm even relevant at all at this point, enough that we can get on the air is not, to me, that's a wonderful and blessed thing for me. But it's lonely being. I was going the beginning of the year to the Browns Backers Club. It's about a half hour away. I have my choice of many, and it becomes painful after a while. And one of the things I just want to throw out there in terms of, I don't know what they should do. I know what I think they should do with Freddie Kitchens. But listen, any competent head coach, any competent staff, anything. I don't think it's a reach to say pick 2 games they lost and they're 8-6. Just pick 2 games. You got a guy Freddie isn't just clearly overwhelmed. Imagine his players. Imagine what Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, Joel Bitonio, guys who've been around the league. This is a players' guild. You know what I mean? It's a horrible union, but these guys know that they're being coached by a buffoon. They've quit.
Well, when you've got 2 defensive coordinators in the same year saying that they know exactly what the Browns are going to run, how do you line up and feel confident?
Well, but the defense, I'm not defending Freddie or the offense by saying, you've got a culture where the best player on the team, and I don't think there's any question that Myles Garrett overall is just a force of nature. At his physical peak, still growing into his physical peak, that not only was the guy making stupid game-changing penalties, but now he's gone and people treat it as if, well, this is an unfortunate thing that happened. No, this is they play exactly like their head coaches and exactly like their GMs. This is a team of no discipline and low character. And there is no leader there. And we have seen this now for an entire season. And all I'm suggesting is not some magical, imagine if Andy Reid had come or Bruce Arians. I'm just saying, imagine they're 8-6 and there's been some consistent player development on the part of a quarterback. I haven't given up on Baker Mayfield. I mean, obviously it's galling to all of us. Forget even Lamar Jackson and the fact that we're going to be watching him, God willing, for the next 10 years. And I say that because I'm 67, not because I'm worried about Lamar Jackson's health. but you know what I'm saying? All of a sudden we're tearing at each other's throats about Baker Mayfield. He's the same guy last year. That doesn't mean he's had a good year. It just means they made a horrible decision, and it was clear early on that there was no learning curve.
Right. Well, and this is
people,
Scott,
the people closest to what? Are we out of time? I got one more thing to say.
Well, no, I wanted to lead you to the because I have an add-on because this kind of ties it all back together with the war on the quote unquote war on the media. When Cleveland Browns media, who've seen everything from Romeo Crennel to Braylon Edwards to Eric Mangini and everything in between, when they tell you that this is the most immature team they've ever seen, they've ever been around, they're not making it up. They're not doing it for attention. It's what they're actually seeing.
And when you have a guy like Jason Lloyd, for example, and Jason Lloyd, is as good as anyone covering sports, as far as I'm concerned, I got to know him a little bit. He was covering the Cavs. I'm just talking as a guy who's covered sports in the area, who brings his A game everywhere, who's unflinching. Even he feels compelled, in his final thoughts, wherever everyone does this, to assert that they like Freddie. I'm not making a joke here. These are guys in the media who've seen all that. And Cleveland media, they really are good folks. What I mean is they're polite Midwesterners. There's not a culture of attacking. I guess that's kind of what makes Tony Grossi look crazy to fans. Is he's the one guy who's going to push Baker Mayfield. He's going to push him. He's just not going to settle for a pat answer. That he's already heard 1,000 times. But I'm saying no one wants to be a dick. No one. You got to deal with Freddie. You got to deal with the media people every day. It's not access journalism. It's the reality of the working day. You got to write columns. You got to do the reader engagement tweets. You got to do a bunch of stuff, and you still got to be able to weigh in and be objective and honest. So when Jason Lloyd says, people might not think so, but I like Freddie Kitchens, and he prefaces his analysis with that, you really do understand no one's rooting for someone to lose his job.
No.
That's a human being. That's a human being with a family. Public humiliation just because I'm unhappy with the record. It's a fan's prerogative. But when you have professional, hard-hitting journalists wanting to establish up front that this isn't personal with Freddie, you know that they know that that it's hopeless. That they're watching a guy who's increasingly hangdog after every game, win or lose. And I don't want Freddie Kitchens to say, I'm concerned about anything except the next game. That's all you can say, but it's a really sad situation. You're watching a guy fail in real time, and you have to ask him questions constantly.
Well, and
starting with, are you worried about losing your job?
And you don't need direct player quotes. I mean, these guys have been around the dead coach walking, and they've seen the way locker rooms react and the way players and rosters react to these kinds of things, and they're telling you what you need to hear. But they're not creating the negativity. They're not in. There's nothing emanating from the media. No. They're just reporting what they're seeing.
And they get the quote. I mean, you're going to get the quote from Jarvis Landry, who I'm not even blaming for screaming at Freddie, but you're going to get the quote that says, "Man, I love Freddie. I still respect Freddie." What else? It's no different than saying, "Come get me on the sidelines." It's like, that's your job. And in the NFL, you've got a union that does not have your back, really. And you've got ownership that really operates from a plantation mentality, like it or not. Feel that it's unfair, why bring race into it? Gee, why don't you pay attention to the sport you're watching? How's that? Before you start dissing Odell Beckham Jr. and anyone else, why don't you look at the sport that you're watching and realize that sports hernia or whatever, you don't even live in the same universe as Odell Beckham any more than you live in the same universe as Tom Cruise. So I again, all these conversations are really fun to have, but these guys, Freddie included, are living it every day under the glare of the spotlight none of us suffer. Magazine writer, businessman, whatever. These guys are in a spot, where lifelong devotion to doing one thing better than anyone else in the world. We can talk all we want, but whatever happens in that locker room, we'll never know. Whatever happens in the owner's suite, we'll never actually know. But when we see the results play out, and when we see a guy like Freddie Kitchens get handed a job, and clearly, he wants to get fired. I mean, I don't understand any other reason. And I'm not saying like I'm Sigmund Freud. I'm just saying, you have, two premier running backs, a young quarterback, and a shaky offensive line, and you do the play calling that he does, the red zone issues that he has, and you continue to struggle when you now have, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Jarvis Landry, you have red zone issues, 13, 14. You know what I'm saying. I mean, I'm looking at the dumbest NFL coach I've ever seen. I haven't watched the NFL since like 1960.
And we've seen Pat Shurmur.
I'm not saying, I mean, unlike other fired coaches, at least Pat Shurmur worked his way, but someone took a flyer on Pat Shurmur I'm not saying that you're wrong or I'm wrong about Pat Shurmur. I'm simply saying the Browns traditionally have been, the last stop. I mean, it's not like a guy like Sashi isn't always going to be an asset.
The last
But
stop.
you're never.
I love it.
Well, but it is. I mean,
know.
even Mike Pettin is going to do well as an NFL defensive coordinator the rest of his career. But
Poor Chud.
Mike Pettin is. But Chud had Norv Turner, and I forget who
Ray Horton.
At least then, I understood at least what was going on. You got the first time head coach. At least they understood the vision behind it. I, like everyone else, was hoping that the Freddie we were going to get was some version of whatever the magic was last year. And, you start off and you watch and you wait to see some progress. And what you're seeing is regression more than progress. Again, whatever Pro Football Focus said, there are reasons to call it progress, Pete, but it's being measured against literally 1-31. And Cleveland fans, they don't want to pay attention to other franchises, other billionaires. And it doesn't mean that Jerry Jones, is a scale of 1 to 10, an 8, and has been 32. I'm just saying, look at the one-loss record, and now look at the shit show this has become, where, again, the national media were very eager to have a Browns Super Bowl team. Anyone who believes the national media roots against Cleveland is flat out insane and apparently was born after 2016. There's nothing the media craved more than the Browns riding, Baker Mayfield and the Alabama pitmaster to glory. And meanwhile, here we are. A couple more wins and the feeling that, this team is playing truly meaningful games in December. And Francisco Lindor would still matter a whole lot to me and a lot of Tribe fans. But I'm feeling the kind of generalized despair, maybe a little less anger, but definitely some of that too, that I wanted to get on with you.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to end. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, hell yeah. Thank you. Seriously.
Even though the topic was what it was, this was a lot of fun.
I enjoy the hell out of it. And I was even making notes because I don't want to be a blithering idiot, or the angry guy anymore. And it's not because, it's some goodness of the heart thing. It's just maybe my perspective has changed. Part of it is just trying to take a step back and look at the power of the money that runs the team. And they're doing well. Whether we're talking about the Haslams, we're talking about the Dolans, we're talking about Dan Gilbert, everyone's prospering. Everyone's doing well. That doesn't mean they don't want to win. They don't want to win in the way that you and I want to win. The whole idea you can't bring free agents to Cleveland or you can't do this. It's always, and that drives me nuts about Cleveland even now, it's always living in the problem. It's always selling yourself short. And look around. It can be done. It doesn't mean it's the smartest business thing in the world. To have 40% of your whole core payroll riding on one player when there's you know what I'm saying. I understand the business of it. I just want to dial back some of the hate and at least say, well, this is what's going on. And we are brethren and sisterin, in terms of our fanhood. It defines us in a way it'll never define ownership. Not in this town. It's just, there are local billionaires. There are people who could do. The one billionaire I know well enough to say, well, have you ever thought about buying, in his case, his hometown team? And he goes, the problem is the chaos. The renegotiate, I forget how he put it, but like buildings don't renegotiate,
Yep.
You buy a building, it's a building. You're not and unless you're passionate and devoted to sports, that your capital is, your investment is going to appreciate, and that sports franchises don't go begging in this country when they're up for sale at all, ever. But, you're buying into a whole lot of publicity and chaos that, at least the one guy that I knew well enough to ask. Yeah, I mean, if I had, $4 or $5 billion, I would certainly try and buy the Cleveland Indians. Absolutely. I mean, for the same reason Jimmy Haslam ain't selling. Isn't there a grandson now, J. Dubs 3 or something?
Yes.
Isn't there?
Yep.
Well, I don't want to end. I'm sorry. I don't want to end on a note of despair. But you remember David Modell, Art Boy?
Oh, God.
You know, he should rest in peace. I'm not talking about Art. I'm talking about David. Art. Anyway, my point is, Haslam's ain't going anywhere. You know.
No, they're not.
Dolan's ain't going anywhere. You know, new minority owner, whatever. Dan Gilbert, who the hell knows? You know, again, God bless him. I know he's been through health horror and all that. But I'm past hating any of those guys. But boy, I am not happy with the state of Cleveland sports right now.
Well, neither am I. But I'm
sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, Scott, and thanks so much to everybody out there for listening.
Happy holidays and a happy, healthy 2020 to all of us.
Yes, sir. Agreed. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.